Hey there, and welcome back to Health, Wealth and Happiness. I'm James.
I'm Joe.
And today's guest is someone close to me within the fitness industry. It's Matt Griffiths. Now, this guy's ex-professional rugby player. He's boxed for England as an amateur. He's won international powerlifting titles, and he's 3 times British champion, record holder in the squat and deadlift as well. He's worked with many elite athletes and coaches such as The Rock, Eddie Hall, Martin Ford, and even Boris Shiko. Matt, it's a pleasure to have you on board. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to do these things. I've worked with James and done these podcasts a few times, and we always have an absolute blast. So I hope today will be nothing short of the same.
100%. All right, let's dive into this. For everyone who's tuning in, who is Matt Griffiths?
This is a question I've thought about a while, really, and it comes down to who do you identify yourself as. And I think at this stage in my life, I'm a father, I'm a partner, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a coach. I spend my time helping people. You know, that's the sort of priorities of things there.
Love it. Fantastic.
So how did you get into? So is it powerlifting or strongman that you do, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you fall into that?
I actually fell into it. It was sort of byproduct of rugby. I was a prop forward playing rugby, and one of my predominant strengths on the pitch was my physical strength. It's always been something I've been sort of naturally quite explosive, always had these sort of big deviations between sort of a 5 rep max and 1 rep max, very able to deliver top end force. And following some injuries during rugby, I was forced to sort of spend more time doing rehabilitation in the gym. And during that time, it became apparent that I was very strong and sort of abnormally so for what people would consider my sort of level of training. And I hooked up with a chap called Lee Marshall, who's a 14-time world masters powerlifting champion. And I sort of started training with him just as a local friend. He was local to my area. And I sort of drifted into it. He actually is now the global president of the GPC, which is the Global Powerlifting Congress. And so it was a natural sort of progression that sort of worked around my inability to play rugby. I could work it around my family at the time. I had a young family, so I could go to the gym around when children were asleep or in bed, etc. And it was still a way for me. You know, I've always been the type that needed to be involved in some sort of sport and have some sort of target and goal. So it just sort of became a progression into that. The strongman side of it came because I missed the mobility and the moving and the physical contact of rugby. And so because of that side of things, the idea of sort of hoiking big awkward objects around and manhandling things quite appealed to me. And so I got into that sort of strongman side and made some great friends from there.
I think we've probably covered a few of those names, haven't we? That's how you stumbled onto knowing Eddie,
yes,
and even Brian Shaw we haven't even mentioned as well. I'm sure the Stokey boys and everything else. Sure. Tell us about that and how this circle came together.
Yeah, I mean, it's the strength world is the strength athletics world. It's not gargantuan, and when you are a certain type of character, and I used to have a sort of, I suppose, an infamous internet persona, in that I was always very blunt and always not outspoken, but I'd tell people the truth, which wasn't always appreciated by some.
Anyone that ever says that are outspoken.
Quite possibly. Maybe I'm just trying to cover up things here. There we go. I mean, there's one of the top British lads, Terry Hollands. He and I actually, although we're good friends now, and I've lent him kit many a time for the Body Power show at the NEC, we actually started off on bad footing, and it was simply because he posted a video doing some very heavy weights on a partial deadlift, and because of his sort of stature and his position, everyone was congratulating him on being sort of king of the world, etc. And then I was the one that chimed in and went, none of those were locked out, so good effort, but you didn't complete a single lift there. And it was one of those situations where it was straight away everyone was jumping on me. But me being me, it's the truth. I'm just telling the truth. What, do you like it or not? You know. But we sort of made up. I approached him in person at Giants Live in Manchester actually, and everything sort of like got quashed under the board. And he actually said to me, he says, I'm not used to it, because everyone does congratulate you. He said, but you've actually been honest, and I've been able to sort of correct my work moving forward.
I think that's where the respect is, though, in the strongman culture. It's a little culture, isn't it, where you're honest and open with each other, but it's so tight, isn't it?
Absolutely, because we all, it's a very, very tough sport, and one of the things that people don't often appreciate from sort of strongman, particularly, is pretty much every lift you do is full body, so it isn't a case of being able to, in a sort of bodybuilding sense, train your shoulders and let them recover while you're training your legs. To do a log clean and press, your legs, your hips, everything's got to be involved to get the log up to your shoulders in the first place. And so you're already, it's constantly working through. So it's a different way of working. And so we all sort of go through those. But the guys are fantastic. There's just the right characters in there, like the Stoltman brothers. Adam Bishop is one of my good friends. He's the strength and conditioning coach for Harlequins and Britain's strongest man now as well. I've had some good deadlift battles with Bishop a few times, which is, and he's, I got injured and sort of drifted out, and he's absolutely progressed leaps and bounds. And I think it's phenomenal to see him doing so well because he's such a nice chap as well.
Yeah, I remember being sat as a kid, all around the telly, watching strongman on a Sunday afternoon, and you don't seem to see that anymore. To be fair, I mean, do you think it doesn't get, as a sport? Do you not think it gets the respect that it deserves?
I think yes and no. I think in terms of the actual sport, it's bigger than it's ever been. But I do think going back to sort of when we were children, the whole concept of television was sort of limited to 4 channels and then 5 channels.
Yeah.
And if one of those was occupied by something, 20% of your TV is taken up by strongman.
Yeah,
whereas nowadays it's sort of backed off onto other channels. It'll be on a Bravo channel or a Channel 5, one of these things. And it gets lost in the mix. But the shows are getting much, much bigger and much more professional. It's become a real sort of standing, people are earning good money from competing at the highest level, whereas back in the days of Jeff Capes and people like that, they didn't even earn enough to live on.
It's quite interesting the different routes with it. Like we look at Thor, how he's sort of transitioned into Game of Thrones, and they're looking at it as a sort of stepping stone for acting or career like that. And obviously you've got bigger names like Savickas and all of those who have just sort of raised the profile of it, which is cool.
Talking of Thor then, because I've started geeking out on this a little bit since I've been working with James. I've become fascinated with the world of lifting and powerlifting and strongman and the rest of it. With his and Eddie Hall's spat at the minute about the legitimacy of the 501 kilo deadlift.
Yes,
What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, they will argue the toss between them, and I think there are some good points. But as James just mentioned him, Big Z, Zydrunas Savickas, just released a video, and I think it is probably the most poignant one because he's not really particularly friends with either camp. 4 times world's strongest man. I think he's got the most strongman records of anyone. And his take on it was, to beat Eddie's record, you have to do it under the same circumstances as Eddie. However, you can set a home gym record, like a special record of 501 kilos using the current circumstances. So other people would perhaps be able to have a referee visit their own gym setup or their own home gym to break that record. He pointed out his own Guinness World Records, actually. Now, the Guinness Book of World Records has got the log record at 220 kilograms, which is Zydrunas Savickas' record. However, since that point, that record has been increased to 227 within strongman, but none of those have been qualified as Guinness World Records.
Just to explain to the listeners that don't follow this sport with the numbers that I just think we should just acknowledge these numbers. So a log press. Explain what a log press is.
Okay, a standard log is 13-inch diameter, and it's got handles that are set apart to a certain point. A log, and it is effectively what has to happen is it's only the middle of the log that's going to be on your chest that has to be that diameter. The outside of it can be larger or smaller as long as it doesn't, cause a shortening of the lift. It has to be picked up, clean to the shoulder level, and then driven overhead. The head has to come through and the feet have to be together in line, locked out. You have to get a down signal from the referee. But the sort of weights we're talking about here, casually talking about 220 kilograms, anyone that has been into a normal gym, that is the equivalent of a standard 20 kilogram barbell with 5 20-kilogram plates on each side. Now, most average men don't come in and deadlift that, which is generally the most favourable mechanical lift. And we're talking about people putting this on an awkward object overhead. You know, this is the equivalent of sort of like 2 motorbikes. This is a lot of weight that they're lifting.
Well, I'm like 84, 85 kilo. That's 2.5 of me. So that's like someone lifting 2.5 of me over the head. It's just mind blowing. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I mean, the level that these guys are, and I think when people haven't met them, I mean, people have come up to me before in this, you know, and they'll say, "Oh, you look like the mountain," and I'm saying, "Well, I'm 6'2" and 130 kilos. He's 6'9" and 210 kilos. You know, there's you know, yes, I'm very big to you, but compared to him, I'm minuscule. You know?
I love seeing the photo of when Eddie won World's Strongest Man and Thor stood next to him, and he's
still taller.
He stood on the third. I think did he come third? Brian Shaw second.
Second he was.
Yeah, sorry. So Eddie's first, he's second, and he's still as tall as him. Bonkers.
I was at
Giant.
When Eddie did his 500 deadlift. I was at that competition, and I was down in the athletes area where all the athletes' families are.
Oh, were you there?
Yeah, absolutely. And Thor completed the stones, and he absolutely destroyed the speed of the stones. It's phenomenal. He came and ran and jumped out the barrier, and I was standing next to where all the Icelandic fans were, and he ran around the back of them, and then he was basically running head on towards me, and my sort of rugby player brain switched on, and I was like, what do I do? What do I do here? Because this man's just going to Jonah Lomu straight over the top of me if I stand here. And then fortunately he turned off and went back into the arena. But when you see a man of that size tearing at you, you think, not sure I want to be in this position, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
You mentioned about Savickas and how he goes quite, isolates himself and this sort of mindset he has to get his craft and his work done, right? You've been around these characters, Eddie, Brian Shaw, even Dwayne. What are these guys as personality traits, their mindset? How are they different to the average Joe?
Savickas is a very interesting
that phrase,
one,
by the way, just for the record.
That's why I used it.
Savickas is an interesting one because he's always kept himself isolated. He's a very, for his mindset, I have spoken to him briefly, and even then he's not so much of a personal character. He likes to keep himself to himself, which is perfectly fine, each to their own. But he likes that kind of isolation, whereas some of the strong men like to train with another high-level strong man. A couple of them will get together, or they'll meet and they'll train together and do that. But the fundamental overriding principle between them is, I believe, it's the belief and the commitment to their craft. Brian Shaw, it's very, very easy to look at this man, 6'8", 200 kilograms, and just go, oh, he's huge. Of course he's going to be strong. That man studies science. He studies the movements. He breaks down every component of every lift, just like the Russian weightlifters, and as you mentioned, Boris Shiko, the likes of things used to do. Building those things up to strengthen the clean movement, to strengthen the press movement, to strengthen the last portion of the lockouts. It's no different to any other sport, to a footballer perfecting the strike, the curve, the angle of the ball, running through, collecting it. A rugby player using the ball, the correct body position. That's exactly what they're doing. And yes, they have to have the genetic capability, but you have to have that input. If you want to achieve the best, you have to give yourself the biggest possible chance and load those dice in your favour.
I love what you said there. It's like what we always say to our clients, the fusion of science and experience, especially with Brian,
absolutely.
How the biomechanics of it all and breaking everything down to optimize that output.
People love to, they have this very sort of like macho attitude in the sort of sports world. I get it a lot, and they're like, beast mode, train insane or remain the same. And I'm just like, nonsense. The moment you can start defying physics, then you can come and talk to me, because up until that point, physics overrides everything. And those are the physical laws we abide by, so we use them to optimal efficiency, because we all know gravity is a harsh mistress and she will always win. So we've got to beat her in the most efficient way possible.
Sure.
Is it something you can teach, or do you think it's something you're either born with or you're not?
I think anything can be learned to an extent. People's capacity to want to learn it can be inhibited by their own mindset. I think if someone's mind is open to learning, then sure, you can start teaching, movement patterns. And even if someone doesn't understand particularly the science of it, they might understand the signals within their own body and the sort of like feedback that their own body gives them as to where an efficient line of movement is. It doesn't mean that you have to know the exact mathematics of everything, go right down to a sort of quantum physics level of how things are working, but just understanding the principal movements of it. People, there's a big difference between a Formula One racing driver and a regular guy driving a car. But the levels of feedback they're used to, they're doing the same thing really, but the level of feedback and the speed of reaction, etc. That's where the difference comes in between the normal athletes and the elite athletes.
I think building on what you said there, Matt, is it nature or nurture? The same thing with Brian Shaw and even, all the taller guys like Thor, genetically, take away all the weight, long limbs, like yourself and myself, not supposed to be strongmen, not supposed to be powerlifters, but they forced themselves into a position where they've just gone at it, drilled it in.
Absolutely.
Until then.
I mean, there's ways of doing it, and people have talked about limbs before, and I've likened it to other things within physics. And I've turned around and said, well, take it back to the sort of medieval days. Did a trebuchet have a long or a short arm? It had a very long arm to develop that maximum leverage to be able to do things. Now, if you can manipulate that and use it in terms of weightlifting, then phenomenal. I mean, I was watching only yesterday. I watched an Olympic weightlifter. He beat the all-time Olympic weightlifting with the snatch and clean and jerk record last year, and he's about 6'6" as well. Long arms, huge, and yet he's snatching sort of 220 kilos and putting 265 kilos above his head on a clean and jerk, just using pure efficiency of movements. Phenomenal. You can't. People like to sort of yes, you can simplify things as much as you like, but there is always a fundamental law behind it as to why it's working that way.
So how much of it's physical and how much of it's mental then?
I think the mental aspect overrides everything. I really do. I'm a big believer in mindset mastery and psychological supremacy being the real sort of key. James and I have had this conversation many times because we use these kind of modules ourselves as part of our pillars of development. Now, when you are training for strength sports, your body is constantly in a state of high stress. Your joints are constantly in a state of stress. And it's very nice to think I'm lifting huge weights, whether it be 100, 200, 300 kilos in a particular lift. Mindset works in a different way then, because a lot of strength athletes aren't too fussed about their physical appearance, or so they say. I don't think anyone is, completely okay with those sort of things, if we're totally honest. But then if a strength athlete goes into the gymnasium and doesn't perform a certain lift, or is forced to back away from the weight to perform lighter reps, a difference between a good strength athlete and a not so good strength athlete can often be their application to that, them understanding the process of why they're having to back away from doing that. And that is where the mindset takes complete control. It's to understand, yes, my top end goal is to do this, but just like anything, you have a Ferrari, you have a performance car. You don't just take it on the Autobahn and put your foot down and red line it the entire way and expect it to last forever. That isn't how it's done. You still have to work through the gears on anything. You always have to work through the gears and always have to bring it back to that standstill point as well. And with that, I think some of the guys, for some of the reasons they get into it, perhaps might be wrong. Some people just want to appear, yes, I'm a big strong man, beast mode, and all that side of things. They're going to find it very difficult when you inevitably have to back away. While during lockdown now, for example, I've been doing a lot of mobility work. Not the most mobile of guys, something I should have been working on a lot more, and I'm taking the opportunity to do it. A lot of guys, people are coming to me saying, I can't really be bothered to do that. And I'm saying, well, what are you actually doing then? What are you actually making use of this time for? It's not a holiday. This is life as we know it for this moment in time. So you have to make use of it somehow and actually if you're going to come out the other side of it, you want to come out the other side of it primed, ready, more flexible, more ready to go. Like the pullback lever arm of a pinball machine, or do you just want to just be sat there regressing from where you were?
So talking about that then, so what is, it's obviously clearly making the most of your time. So what is a general day as it is now for you then? Now that we're in
for me,
yeah.
I generally I get up. We usually get up about 6:30, and then I'll have I'll get some water down me first thing. Have some lemon water, and then one of the first things I do, I like to get up, get training straight away. So I'll spend about 30 minutes working on mobility first, dynamic stretching. Then I'll do about an hour and a half worth of strength work. And then I'll come back. Then I'll start my eating, sort of breakfast, things like that. Then I'm obviously working with my clients. So I'm jumping on, checking my messages, going through performance videos for clients, lunch, etc. It's a bit different at the moment because we obviously the kids are around as well, so we're trying to intersperse things with entertaining children, as we all have to do.
Probably hear man in the background screaming. To be fair, I don't pick up on that.
No, I can't hear them, but,
right,
but ours are inside. They've had a new rabbit, so they're excited with the rabbits inside at the moment. So that's keeping them sort of occupied. And then it's a because I tend to work from home anyway. It's a relatively normal structure for me. I've just used the opportunity because I've now moved to a home gym setup, which I'm fortunate to be able to do because I had a lot of equipment before in the gym I was involved in. I'm actually using the time where I would be traveling to and from the gym to sort of intersperse those workouts and be able to put in another workout. So I'm training twice a day where I'll do HIIT training and more mobility work. And it's key. I think it's key to being able to sort of keep a positive mindset on things. Really do.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to bed a little bit later than I should be, and I'll probably enjoy a few more beers than I should in the sun. But you can take the man out of rugby, but you'll never take the rugby out of the man.
I think for those who are tuning in and who are interested in training and taking that to another level, I think what you touched on there about the mobility side of things, it's not the most glamorous side of things, but like you said with Brighton Shaw, it's the little 1%, 2% that are going to make all the difference to you lengthening that range of motion or increasing your progressive overloads and thus. But I think, that fine attention to detail is what separates you from the rest. And that's my sort of follow-on question to you, Matt, is this mindset that you see like Eddie Hall, yourself, how are you harnessing that into business? As you say, you're an entrepreneur. How does that work for you?
It's one of those things where, and we've spoken about this a lot, because obviously, for those of you who don't know, James and I do we've done a lot of trainings together, and I've got huge respect for these gents. And we both come from an athletic background and we both love the science side of things. So that's why I think we get along so well. I think the way I sort of harness it with the sort of the business world, we see a saturation online with coaches. We can all see it. We all see the sort of things that are going out there, but most are sort of very generic McDonald's burgers without trying to sound offensive. That's what they are. You see the sort of things they're posting, and it is very simple. Oh, lose 10 pounds, lose 20 pounds. And the reality of the situation is most people out there, most intelligent animals can go out there and figure out how to do that themselves. The real thing that they're perhaps missing is the key accountability, and the accountability to the right people, such as James and myself, where we're creating these communities and we're creating these backgrounds of support and we're creating the work they need. Now, I know for a fact that both James and I produce documents for our clients, etc., relating to mindset, nutrition, accountability, etc. But that isn't the real key. I think the real sort of access point is that our sort of ability to think, and it's access to us that is sort of the real sort of key with those things. And I think that is one of those things that does separate because of the attention to detail. Because a lot of the times people aren't quite sure of what detail they should be putting their attention to. They'll start off on a journey. They're going from A to B and they're getting sidetracked by C and D, and they see the next thing come along, the next buzz, the next clickbait post comes along, the next lose this in this many days, the next learn to do the splits in 7.5 minutes, the next, lose 30 pounds yesterday, and all this sort of nonsense. And they get distracted and they don't focus on what it is. So the sort of methods that we create to focus them on things, I think, is a real key. And that's how you get to that sort of elite level, that top 1%.
Yeah, and again, I can vouch firsthand for that. I mean, that's how me and James met. I'm a client of James's.
Okay.
Working together since August, and I've lost over 26 kilo since then.
Fantastic.
The last 7-8 months, feel amazing for it, feel great. And that is one of the things, and again, it's something that I also do in mind. I mean, I'm in financial services industry, and I say exactly the same as what you just said to people, that try not to get dazzled by the lights. Don't get sucked into these get-rich-quick schemes.
Absolutely.
And it's having that accountability, which is massive.
I think it comes down to, you've just touched on this there. If I was looking into some sort of financial investment, if I'm looking into, that kind of thing, where do I go? Am I just going to go online and start going, oh, who's going to invest in stocks and shares for me and guarantee me to make money? Well, it's not going to happen, is it? You go to an industry expert. You come to someone like yourself, for example, and you go, right, this person has got a track record of producing results across these boards. So you've got more chance of making a great success there. And it's an example I've always used is with MIT, the university in America. Now, it's a big engineering university. It's quite famous. People know of it. Their entire coursework is online for free. So you can go on and you can study an engineering degree yourself online for absolutely nothing. And my simple example to people is, go ahead and do that. Now, you tell me, if you were to do that yourself, pick the modules up from where they were, because they're not in any particular order, try and figure it out, fathom your own way through it. Or if you were to invest in learning from the professor, what's going to make the journey easier? Where will you get to the end result more, and what will save you more time and probably earn you more money in the long run? Yeah. And that's how it is. It's that straightforward.
Yeah.
It's that straightforward. If I was to do this in the financial world, I'm not just talking about the fitness world, in the financial world, I'd probably waste more money investing in schemes that were wrong before I actually realised, Christ, I've just lost £50,000 doing this.
I like that.
Actually employ somebody.
Yeah. I'm stealing that one, Matt.
You go for it. You can have that one.
Okay, so Dwayne Johnson.
Yes.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Where's this come about then? So James mentioned that you've trained with him, or you know him, or
yeah, I did some work with his squat for him. I've worked with done some work with John Cena, the wrestler, as well. And it purely came about
wrestling days.
Yes, in his wrestling days, yeah. And the reason it came about was because where I live and where I was training, I am about 5 minutes away from the NEC, the National Exhibition Centre, where the WWE put shows on. Now, very often when these athletes are in the area, they look for gyms to train at. When they're in certain gyms, a lot of them prefer I've always been involved in the Olympic weightlifting, the powerlifting, the strongman, those are the sort of gyms I'm in, probably the more spit and sawdust type gyms. But these guys, where it's probably more functional based and less glamorous, it's less like perhaps a David Lloyd, and it's more an independent run. And that's where these athletes like to train, because they don't get as harassed as much and they can lift some decent weights, etc. And they come in, and we just got with Dwayne. It was a case of we got talking, and he was asking somebody about one of the bits of kit and how it was used, and in terms of the movement, he was watching some powerlifters squat, and one of them turned around and I just went, "He's the man to ask over there." They used to call me the Sheldon Cooper of strength sports, because I was that sort of anal about movement patterns and movement functions, etc. And he's a tall guy, he's a lot of the wrestlers, they make out they're taller than they are, but no, he's genuinely, I'd say he's about 6'4", 6'5". He's a few inches taller than me. And it was just a case of correcting his squat lines, etc. And he's a fun guy. He's a real nice, he is as he seems. He's a very genuine.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. Is he really that nice, or is he a bit of a dick, really, and he just puts it all on?
He's nice, but he's that, there's that sort of, I suppose it's that, I wouldn't call it arrogance, because he deserves to feel good about himself. He's in phenomenal shape. He's done really well for himself. Coming from a position he did where his father was already a very, very well-known wrestler, and then he's bypassed his father. Yeah. It's got to be hard to live under the shadow of someone like that. Yeah. But he's very genuine. He's very confident in himself. He's always a very pleasantable chap. So I wouldn't have a bad word said about him.
I follow him very close on social media. I think he's fantastic, the stuff he puts out. Like I said, what he's done. I read something a few weeks ago. Apparently, he makes twice as much from advertising and Instagram than he does what the movie pays him than the actual acting job itself. On the last couple of films he's done, the advertising budget given to him for him to just put out on Instagram.
I could absolutely believe that. I really could. It's crazy. Very powerful social media.
Oh, he's a power machine, isn't he, when it comes to media?
For sure. You said about how it comes across sometimes to the public. It may come across like arrogance, right? But we sort of understand it's not arrogance; it's certainty. It's certainty.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a perfect word for it. Yeah.
And you harness that into like Eddie Hall right now. He's an entrepreneur now. Really, he's got his brand and he's pushing it like hard, isn't he? And he's just challenging channeling, shall I say, that certainty in there.
It's very true. I mean, I was talking to Eddie before about it, and it was, people were saying, people trying to say, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? And he said, well, he put a huge bet on himself when he was doing his 500 kilo deadlift. We got him there. He sort of set himself up financially for life from it. And it was a situation where people are making these comments. I hosted a seminar for him, actually, and people were asking all these questions about his future in strongman. And he actually turned around at the time and he said, it's how you use it and how you market things. Because at that time, there was only himself and 4 who were making 6-figure salaries. They were the only ones that were doing that. I'm not sure where it stands now, but at the time, that's where it was. And yes, he's an entrepreneur now. He's pushing, he's doing he's got a marketing brand out. He's doing these, these displays. He's taking part in gymnastics, etc. And, again, Eddie's a great guy. He's funny. He's a funny guy.
I follow him on YouTube, and one of the things I really like about Eddie Hall, he just seems so genuine and so honest. And good or bad, he just seems to just tell it how it is, which is one of the things I do really respect him for.
Yeah, he is. He's very crass. He can be very blunt and stuff like that. But I'm ex-military, ex-rugby. I can get along just as fine with that as I can being well spoken with someone. Yeah. I'd rather let the guard drop sometimes and just let it all out.
Yeah.
Matt, with coronavirus right now, we're all in lockdown. Okay, this mindset that we keep sort of talking about in this podcast today, what mindset are you adopting with it? How are you, challenging this moving forward, and what advice do you have to the listeners?
I think one of the things that's really helped my mindset is this glorious sunshine. I think I do feel for those that aren't fortunate enough to have sort of an outdoor area themselves, because it's been a sort of saving grace of mine. But one of the things I've tried to sort of put across to myself, and I have had to have words with myself about it and sort of have those moments of calm clarity, is that this isn't a situation that's just being a negative towards me. This is a global situation. This isn't a case of, this is all against me. I should feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Woe is me. Because this is affecting everybody. Okay, so what I started doing was looking at this going, well, I'm serving my clients. I'm serving my family. I'm there for them. What I need to do is set an example and be a leader and pull them through it. Lead them through to the lights while everything else is coming in, because I may be old-fashioned, I may be sort of an antiquated view or something like that, but that's how I see my job as a man. That's part of what I do, so that's the way I go forward. I try and bear the brunt of as much as I can for everybody else, and push forward and try not to let it sort of get me down, and focus on, I think the real key to this, and it's a great quote I heard before, was just simply control what you can control.
Yeah. Control the controllables. Yeah.
Worrying about that which you can't control, it's just muddy water. You're standing in a river against a current that's going to wash you away eventually. So I'd rather be in a boat on top of it and just go with it.
For sure. I think it's testament as well to see all your clients still winning, still getting results, which is great. And that's all coming from the leader himself, So it's just good. Really good to see, Matt. Yeah, I'm sure we all want to know is that, let's rewind back to an 18-year-old Matt Griffiths. What advice would you give him of all the years you've been through pro now?
Don't go off to war. That's definitely what I would give him. But that's kind of a given, isn't it? Stay true to who you are. Stay true to yourself. I think as a young, and we're probably still sort of like fighting for our position and fighting for our identities at that age. And I think as you get more long in the tooth and more life experience, less of the unimportant things have an impact on you. And just say, focus on this, focus on who you are, your character. What these people out here that you're perceiving as your peers now think honestly doesn't matter, because eventually the cream will always rise to the top.
Solid. Love it.
Okay, well, and James, anything else to add? Or
no, mate, Matt, it's been great having you on. We've done so many of these together across the years, but we wanted to bring you on because I know you've got so much value to give to people, and more so inspiration really of how far you've come. And so people can go and actually take those revelations and implement them themselves, not information, implement them themselves. But yeah, it's been great having you on, mate. Awesome. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they go?
Yeah, by all means, I'm on Instagram, G4 Strength and Condition. I'm there. I've got my strength coach page, Matt Griffiths, strength and conditioning coach, and a G-Force group on Facebook as well. There's all links to contact me, or by all means, just direct message me on Facebook if they want to have a chat about anything, and we'll go from there.
Solid. Love it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time, Matt. Really appreciate it, buddy. And
thank you both. I really do appreciate it.
We'll see you soon.
I'll see you in the next one, Matt. Cheers.
I'm off to have a beer. You take care, guys.